big names of actual crimes that they committed, that'd be a way of actually lessening the amount of time that he does, or possibly even walking away.
I absolutely do not see him being victorious in a criminal trial.
This has been a fist of tyranny that has been punching for decades. It must stop.
Well, Diddy's downfall has sent shockwaves through the entertainment industry and beyond. The blast radius from the uncovering of his alleged offences could yet swallow many more powerful and famous figures. Diddy is accused of creating a criminal enterprise which engaged in sex trafficking, racketeering, kidnapping, bribery and forced labour. His lawyers say he'll fight the charges, but after the testimony you're about to hear, you'll be staggered he avoided the attention of law enforcement for so long. I'll speak to a lawyer, a whistleblower and an insider for an uncensored insight into the showbiz scandal of a generation. And Jaguar, I'm going to start with you. You've been called a whistleblower. You knew Sean Diddy Combs for a long time. You attended a number of his infamous parties. And in 2022, you made headlines after comments where you called him a sex trafficker. And in response, you were called crazy and jealous. Do you feel vindicated by the events of the last few weeks?
No, not at all. Because he's just the beginning. Until him and his cohorts are all held to account publicly and legally, the victims, they're not safe.
How bad was it?
That's what I care about. I care about the victims.
No, I understand. How bad was it, do you think, what was going on?
I'm going to tell you right now that me, as a woman who has been in the industry for over 30 years, I've been performing live since I was 13. My first handler was McKinley Horton. I come to find out 25 years later that a scar that was on his face with a very elaborate story he gave me was put there by a woman who he assaulted. To live through these things and hear your elders in the business, people like Patti LaBelle say, just avoid him, honey. And being taught to be just avoid him, honey. It's not good enough. Not when you live through these things, you're still suffering the PTSD created by all of this, and you're talking to a victim that's 20 years younger than you, and she's telling you the exact same thing that happened to you.
Right, there's been a lot of rumor mill about what has happened in the rap world. A lot of allegations that the misogyny in the lyrics clearly was based on a general misogyny towards women away from the music. And that clearly seems to have been borne out by these charges against Diddy, which if he's found guilty of all this, he's never coming out of prison. How dangerous do you think...
Thank God.
How dangerous do you think he is as a person?
I think he's one of the most dangerous people I've ever met. A lot of people have been questioning, well, she doesn't really know him. She has no knowledge of him. She doesn't have a picture with him. I'm smarter than Claudia Jordan. I would never take a picture with the devil. Everyone knew he was the devil. He's been the devil for 30 years. He's been covered and protected by not only Clive Davis, but Lucien Grange. He was selected to be the demon that he is, to keep the culture in line so the industry could continue to rape it for all of its precious jewels. We have too many lost. The list of lost is ridiculous. And everyone knows Diddy was selected for this job. He's the Judas.
Do you think that if he's cornered in the way that he's been now, that he may start revealing things about other people?
He has no choice. His ego and his drug addiction won't allow him to do anything different. Anybody who thinks he's not going to talk is crazy. The simple fact that he's not saying more now only means that the people who have been protecting him all along, who put him in position to be such a horror to the Black community, still find value in him. He's got everybody on tape. They all know it. It's a mess.
For those who were never at these freak-off parties, what were they like?
See, this is the thing. Everything that I'm about to say to you is not my firsthand knowledge. It is my firsthand witness account experience. I was a sex worker. I was a dominatrix before I got my record deal. That's how I know how the dark world and the sex world and the entertainment world run hand in hand. That's why the movie Blink Twice is so important. Salute to Zoe Kravitz. The sex workers that I have worked with throughout the years and continue to work with even to this day have worn hidden cameras. I have my own tapes. I've seen what they do. The ritualistic behaviors, the drugging, putting girls in the suitcases, dumping them in alleyways. It's horrifying. And it's all done under the protection of, this is going to be paid off. There's another NDA. This is going to be, it's terrible.
It seems to have been something that a lot of people knew about, but people were simply too scared to talk about.
Everyone knows. And every person that's sitting there trying to act surprised knows very well. The whole point of this, like Cat Williams said when he sat with Shay Shay earlier this year, the whole point of this is for them in a coordinated effort to pretend like none of it is real for the public's perception. But everyone knows what's going on, and it's been going on for years. It's been going on before Diddy. See, people keep looking at him like he's the Sputnik that came out of nowhere. This is someone who was designed to be what he is. We got to stop making Diddies. And if we're going to do that, then we got to go back. We got to go back to even further, the mentors of these people. Because Diddy was taught how to do what he does systematically, and Clyde Davis has been his greatest teacher.
Look, Clyde Davis is not here to respond to that. Jaguar,
Guess they're on vacation.
If this goes to court, Jaguar, do you think that the world is going to be shocked by what comes out?
Oh, absolutely. I just don't know why they are. It's been happening in front of everyone's faces for decades. For decades.
How many victims?
What's the difference between me and Judy Garland? Social media.
How many victims?
There was none for her.
How many victims potentially do you think there could be?
Thousands. Thousands. I've talked to hundreds that I deal with still myself. I think people should really look into that more. I am friends with Albie Shore. I love him. I love his children. I knew Kim. We used to all hang out together at the Kit Kat Club back in the mid-90s when Diddy was first starting his reign. I watched that whole thing happen. And everything that Albert has been through, every attempt on his life that has been ignored by the authorities, it all leads back to Diddy, and everyone knows it. The wiretapping of the phones, putting air tag on children during visits. These are normal practices that these people do.
Jaguar, I've got to leave it there. I really appreciate you joining me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. And thank you for caring.
I do care. Thank you very much. Well, I'm joined now by the host of Vlad TV, DJ Vlad. DJ Vlad, I mean, it's pretty horrifying listening to these testimonies. What did you make of what you just heard?
Well, Jaguar Wright is known to be a conspiracy theorist. I don't really co-sign anything that she says. I've never had her on my show, and I don't have any plans to have her on my show.
You don't believe her?
She's got an album in 20 years, and a lot of this stuff is just stuff she's heard, things she's making up, and so forth. I'm not saying that there aren't serious things that Diddy may have done, but yeah, I can't co-sign anything that Jaguar Wright is saying, if that's your question.
Well, I mean, obviously, since we last spoke, there have now been these charges against Diddy, which are incredibly serious. You didn't think at the time we last spoke that he was likely to face these charges. Are you surprised it's come to this?
I'm not surprised, because I feel that law enforcement in general is reactionary. I think that when you look at high-profile individuals, their arrests, indictments usually come after a documentary, a big TV show, or in Diddy's case, it was this huge lawsuit that Cassie filed that everyone got to see all the details and all the attention that came to it. So yeah, it wasn't a surprise that it actually happened, because you've seen this happen over and over again. R. Kelly, Harvey Weinstein, all the attention that they got, and then now Diddy. So yeah, I mean, this is ultimately the world that we live in. But he'll have his day in court. And, his lawyer said that he's not going to take a plea deal, because I think a plea deal at this point is probably going to be very heavy-handed, probably 20 years plus. So it makes sense for him to go to court. But we'll ultimately see what happens, because we haven't really seen, apart from some of the funny stuff of, oh, there's 1 million bottles of lube that they found there. I'm sorry, 1,000 bottles of lube and so forth. We have yet to really see what the evidence is. And I think once we see the actual evidence, then people will actually formulate an opinion on what's happening right now.
Do you think there's a lot of people in the rap world in particular who are pretty fearful right now of where this may all lead? Is it a bit like the Epstein scandal, do you think?
I don't really think so, because, I mean, ultimately, everyone wanted to go to Diddy's white parties when they were happening. If I got an invite, I would go. But there's a party within a party. There's the actual party where the big celebrities go to, the Howard Sterns and the Leonardo DiCaprios and so forth. You never hear of any of them really being involved in any of this stuff. They go home, at 2, 3 o'clock a.m. And then there's the private parties that seem to involve the sex workers and probably certain types of people that are kind of in an inner circle. No. And we'll see if those names ultimately come out or not. I think that when it comes to a situation like the feds, cooperating is a very big thing. And I think if Diddy cooperates and gives up some big names of actual crimes that they committed, that'd be a way of actually, lessening the amount of time that he does, or possibly even walking away.
I mean, what had you heard about Diddy over the years? Obviously, people knew he had parties. They knew he was a big rap star and so on. But the nature of this kind of thing. I mean, I'm asking because when I watched, for example, I met Diddy a couple of times. He was always perfectly charming to me. But I've met a lot of people who are charming and turned out to be monsters. The video that came out of showing him beating up his then girlfriend in a hotel corridor was so shocking that when I watched it, I remember thinking, well, this guy is capable of anything. I mean, a man that would do that, who's that famous, who would do that to a woman in a hotel corridor, public hotel corridor, if he's prepared to be that violent in public, knowing there might be cameras around, he's prepared to do pretty much anything, was my conclusion. I mean, what did you hear about him over the years?
Yeah, I mean, that tape was horrific. And after our interview that we did with Roger Bonds, who I helped to bring onto the show, I did my own interview with Roger Bonds. It was a very in-depth, I think, two-hour interview where he goes into actually witnessing a lot of women that were physically abused by Diddy. I mean, not only Cassie, of course, which you saw multiple times, but Kim Porter. He was on a trip where Kim Porter got her nose broken allegedly by Diddy and flew in a plastic surgeon to fix it. There was a personal chef that Diddy beat up. I actually heard voicemails of her describing it. This wasn't even something that she wanted to come publicly with. There was other women as well that I got details on. So I think that Diddy has a long history of violence towards women, but also of men, because there's also the Steve Stout incident. If you remember that whole situation, he was in a music video with Nas, Hate Me Now, and there was a scene where Diddy was on the cross like Jesus, and I guess he went to Steve Stout afterwards and said that he wants to take that part out. That part wasn't taken out, so Diddy and his entourage show up at Steve Stout's office and they beat him with a champagne bottle, which they ultimately settled out of court for. So I think there's a lot of violence that has happened around him, and I think it at this point is just catching up to him.
There's lots of rumor mills about him being secretly gay or bisexual or whatever. I mean, I don't care, but do you think there's much credence to those?
I mean, it's hard to say. I have heard, because remember, for example, the Wendy Williams situation. She was on the radio in New York, and she said that she had photos of Diddy in a gay type environment of some sort. And I had someone actually explain to me what that photo was after the fact. And Diddy came in and threatened to sue the radio station unless she was fired. And she was fired, and she had to go to Philly for, I think, 5 years or something like that. So there was that. I'm not sure how true it is, because it was just a photo, and a photo, could mean a lot of different things. I mean, the fact that he's a cuckold, that he likes to masturbate while watching women that he's with have sex with other men. I don't know. Is that gay? Is that bisexual? Is that just being a cuckold? It's hard to say. It's not something that I'm actually into. But I'm sure it blurs the lines between homosexuality and bisexuality somewhat. But I don't think he's exclusively gay, because he has a lot of children. It's hard to really say, and it ultimately doesn't really matter. And, I've talked about this in my interviews. I think if he came forward and said, hey, I'm a bisexual man, I think a lot of the jokes, like the no Diddy jokes and so forth, will kind of ease down, and people might actually be a little understanding of his situation a little bit more, as opposed to him denying it. But ultimately, who knows? I have no idea.
We've talked, people have talked a lot in the last few years that it's unusual that so few people in the music business have been held to account under the Me Too campaign umbrella in the way that other industries were held to account. Could this be, following R. Kelly and others, could this be a tipping point where there might be a lot of other rap stars in particular, perhaps with very checkered backgrounds, lots of rumors about them, could all start falling like dominoes?
It's hard to say. Like I said in the beginning, it's very reactionary. I think if there is a lot of media attention over somebody, there's a documentary about them, there's movies about them and so forth, I think that ends up getting on law enforcement's radar, and then you will see things kind of escalate very quickly. It's hard to say. R. Kelly was extremely high profile, and there will be others, but I don't think that the music industry is really having less situations than other industries. I mean, every industry has certain situations and they're high profile, and there's a bunch of other stuff that kind of falls below the radar.
Finally, DJ, what do you think is going to happen here? Do you think Diddy will ever come out of prison?
That's a tough one, because I was really shocked that he didn't get a bond. I thought for sure that he'd be sitting in his mansion right now awaiting trial, but he's sitting in a jail cell right now. And it could be years before this actually makes it to trial. So it proves that things are very, very serious on his end. And if you look at the R. Kelly situation, he got, I believe, 30 years. This may fall along the same lines, except the only difference is when I looked into the R. Kelly case, a lot of the convictions were based on underage girls. You've heard a few spatterings of underage accusations, but in general, it seemed like most of the women were of legal age in the Diddy case. So I'm thinking it won't be as severe as it is with as it is with R. Kelly. But for someone like Diddy, who's in his mid-50s, he doesn't want to spend 5, 10, 20 years in prison.
No.
He wants to get out. He wants to keep it moving. So I think he will get out of prison at one point. It's just hard to say, right now what it's going to be.
Yeah, it is. It's a fascinating story. DJ Vai, thank you very much indeed for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm joined now by Ariel Mitchell-Kidd, who's a lawyer for one of Diddy's alleged victims. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. There are so many people coming forward now with allegations about Diddy. What do you think about the scale of this case?
Well, before I get into that, I kind of want to address the prior two panelists. First with Mrs. Jaguar White. She said a lot of things that were very jarring in her explanation of what she saw and had firsthand accounts on. My concern for her, she's saying a lot of things that could be considered libelous.
Right.
And I would suggest that she contacts an attorney, if only to vet the information she has or purports to have from other victims. At least they can protect her, and then they can also do their due diligence, the attorneys, to make sure that the information she's receiving is accurate outside of the things that she knows and may have proof of. I was very concerned about some of the things that she had said in her prior segment. I also want to address Mr. Vlad, who I know to be a culture vulture, who takes from the Black community and doesn't give back and puts artists in situations where then they are indicted by the police. And he's very much so what we call police type investigation in the Black community. And for him to repudiate what Mrs. Wright has said, I thought was completely out of line. He can say he doesn't agree, which is fine. But for him to be someone who constantly uses the Black community and uses them as a means for his platform, I thought that was very inconsiderate and unprofessional. Now, to get to your question that you asked of me, regarding the victims. There are victims coming out every day, even someone who contacted me last night. So, and it's only standing to be more individuals coming out. I do talk to some of the other attorneys who represent victims that we already have known because they filed cases, who have additional victims who plan to come forward and they plan to file cases against very soon. So it's only a matter of how many more are going to come out, and it seems to be, it'll be very many more.
You've said that you've been contacted regarding the sale of one of the Diddy freak-off tapes, and that it features a very high-profile celebrity. What can you tell us about that?
So actually, I recently was contacted by one of my business partners who's also an attorney, who said to me, well, why are we not writing the demand letter to try to do the catch and kill? And I said, well, if you want to do it, then I'll connect you and you can essentially do it. He was also concerned about wanting to protect the other person who was in the film, mainly because I've known about this for about 3.5 weeks to about a month. I've been communicating with these people who purport to have that videotape. And it wasn't until Thursday night that they outright said, can you write on your letterhead a letter to the individual who's also in the tape and see if they're interested in a catch and kill? And is that something, we'll give you X amount of percentage of it. And at the time I was like, I don't think I want to be involved in this, but I hadn't had time to process. But the other attorney I'm speaking of, he's pretty much been in the know the entire time since I first got contacted by these individuals with the tape. And we're pursuing now a meeting with the three of us for us to broker, I guess, a situation where we'll have certain guarantees that once we make the representations to the person in the tape, that we have some level of assurances that this is a valid tape.
And just to be clear, two thoughts about this. One, is it a household name that we're talking about here? And secondly, are they engaged in any criminality from what you understand?
Household name, very much so. More of a household name than Mr. Combs.
Wow,
and
really?
Criminality, they are engaged in pornography. They're not doing anything illegal per se. I can't say that well, I'll say this. My concern was that I could not verify the age of the individual. And so that was my concern about not having anything sent to me and viewing it in the way that I did via stills, via FaceTime video. So I didn't want to have anything in my phone because my issue is we can't determine if this person is 17 to 21.
Right. Fascinating. It's been reported there could be a class action with over 50 alleged victims of Diddy. It also feels like there could be a lot more than that. Do you think, when you look at this case now, that he's ever going to come out of prison?
I do not think Mr. Combs will get out. I was not surprised that he did not get bond. I was saying from the beginning that I was fairly certain, due to my experience in the legal field, that he would not be getting bond and that he would be there until his court case. I also feel as if having a trial would not be in his best interest, and I'll explain why. Everything that comes out in that criminal trial will be used by not only me, but every other civil litigator who has a civil case against Mr. Combs. Everything that the federal government proves beyond a reasonable doubt, because they have a higher criteria to meet than we do. It's the preponderance of the evidence in civil court. So if we have the federal government, if you will, doing all of our heavy lifting for us in a very public trial, all of the discovery that is done will be very valuable, invaluable almost, to every civil attorney who is working on a civil case, which I believe we're about at 14, 15, outside of the other attorney who recently said that he has 50 individuals. And I don't know if he actually has 50 people or if that's a shock value number. I'd be curious to see once that filing comes out. I haven't seen it. I do know other attorneys who have several individuals that they are in the process of filing a complaint for. I'm in the process of filing the complaint for another victim and fielding calls from other individuals who I may take on as clients. I've actually spoke to multiple individuals, but did not take on everybody as a client because I was unable to verify what it was that they were saying, not because I didn't believe them or believe that what they were saying to be true. And that's why I've also expressed at the beginning that Mrs. Wright needs to seek legal counsel, not only about things that she's saying, things that other people are saying that she's repeating, only because a lawyer will go and do a certain level of due diligence to make sure that there's a good faith basis that the claims being asserted are actually true. But I never thought that Mr. Combs would get bond. I do not feel it would be advantageous for him to take this to trial because it would only destroy, not destroy him financially, but also let's even pretend he were to get off. Everything, which I absolutely do not see him being victorious in a criminal trial. The feds have, I believe, like a 97 point something success rate. He's pretty much shooting blind in that situation. His attorney is not doing anything to help him either. And some of the public statements that he's been giving is actually turning public perception more negatively towards Mr. Combs. Not that I'm trying to help him at all in a legal sense. However, when we talk about criminal law, when we talk about the feds this is not a state case, this is a federal case. When we talk about their success rate, the federal government, especially the Southern District of New York, we're talking about people who aim to kill is the best way I can put it. They are successful. They are the leaders in the field. And anything that comes out, any discovery, any testimony, any depositions that come out will be used in his civil cases, which I don't think he's going to want, because that's all he's creating evidence for us to use. And to the point that, while I don't want to acknowledge Vlad, the point that he made earlier about being heavy-handed in terms of any settlement, I do agree to that, only because one of the charges and the main charges is a RICO. And a RICO carries a life sentence, not just a 25 or 40 year or whatever. It's a life sentence. And if we think about how RICO was created in New York to take down mafia bosses, mob bosses. And that's what Mr. Combs is. He's a mafia boss. He's a New York mafioso boss. And the RICO law was created to take down people like him. So if he were to take a plea deal, if only to save himself any potential liability in terms of things that could be used against him in civil court, I can't possibly see him taking less than 25 to 30 years in a plea bargain. However, if I was him, that would be the only option I would have and the only option I would take.
Absolutely fascinating analysis. Thank you very much indeed for joining me, Ariel Mitchell-Kidd. Appreciate it.